Holden Summers pressed the brakes of his beat-up pickup truck, squinting up at the massive iron gates in front of him, wondering for the 100th time if he had the wrong address. "Daddy, are we gonna fix the castle?" His 5-year-old son, Ali, asked from the back seat, swinging his legs excitedly. Holden ran a hand through his messy brown hair. "Looks like it, buddy." Truth was, Holden didn't have the luxury of second-guessing. He needed this job, badly. After his construction company folded last year, he'd been taking whatever odd repair work he could find to keep food on the table. When he saw the ad posted, "urgent repair work needed, good pay," he replied immediately, not expecting much, definitely not expecting this. The gates suddenly buzzed open. Holden drove up the winding driveway, past manicured gardens that looked straight out of a movie. The mansion was a massive white stone estate with a fountain bigger than the entire apartment building he and Ali lived in. "Stay close to me, okay?" Holden said, grabbing his worn tool bag and lifting Ali out of the truck. The front door opened before he could even knock. And then he saw her. Wren Radley. She wasn't what he expected at all. No stiff old lady or fancy businessman. She looked about his age, maybe late 20s, with long chestnut brown hair pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder, ripped jeans, and a soft gray sweater that made her look normal, beautiful but normal. "Hi," she said, flashing a bright smile. "You must be Holden." "Yeah, Holden Summers." He shifted his bag onto his other shoulder, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the oil stains on his shirt. "And this is my son, Ali. Sorry, he's kind of my shadow these days." Wren crouched down to Ali's level. "Hi, Ali, I'm Wren. It's nice to meet you." Ali grinned. "You have a big house." Wren laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made your chest feel lighter. "Yes, it's a little too big if you ask me." Holden relaxed a little. She didn't seem stuck up. That was a good start. "Come on in," Wren said, stepping aside. "The kitchen ceiling's leaking, and there's a bunch of stuff that needs fixing. I can show you." Inside, the house was even more impressive. Marble floors, high ceilings with chandeliers, and art that probably cost more than Holden's entire life. But Wren wasn't showing off. She led them straight to the kitchen, pointing out a water stain on the ceiling. "Old pipes probably," Holden muttered, studying it. "I'll need to get into the attic to check." "Whatever you need," Wren said. She glanced at Ali, who was staring wide-eyed at the massive kitchen island. "Would you like a cookie? I just baked some." Ali looked up at Holden for permission. Holden chuckled. "One cookie's fine, bud." As Ali climbed onto a bar stool, Wren handed him a plate with a cookie the size of his head. Holden got to work, hauling his ladder from the truck. The ceiling leak wasn't terrible, but it was clear the house hadn't had proper maintenance in a while. Hours passed. Wren stayed nearby, occasionally asking if he needed anything, chatting with Ali, making them both feel weirdly welcome. By the time Holden packed up his tools, the sun was setting. Wren handed him a thick envelope. "Here's the payment we agreed on, plus a little extra for Ali's cookie-eating entertainment." Holden hesitated. He hadn't even given her a final bill yet. "You sure?" he asked, frowning. She nodded, positive. He tucked the envelope into his pocket, trying not to feel awkward. "Thanks. If you need anything else, I'm free most afternoons after I pick Ali up from school." Wren smiled again, this time softer. "Actually, I do have a few more things that need fixing." Holden nodded. "Just let me know." As he backed out of the driveway, Holden glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. Wren stood on the front steps, waving at them, the porch lights casting a soft golden glow around her. "Daddy, I like her," Ali said sleepily from the back seat. Holden smiled despite himself. "Yeah, me too, buddy." The next few weeks flew by. Holden came by almost every afternoon, fixing broken door hinges, patching up walls, replacing old pipes. Wren was always there, offering lemonade, teasing him about his stubbornness when he insisted on doing things the hard way. And somewhere along the way, something shifted. It wasn't just about fixing things anymore. It was about the way Wren laughed when Ellie told her knock-knock jokes. The way she listened when Holden talked about missing the business he lost. The way she looked at him like he wasn't just some broke single dad barely scraping by. But Holden couldn't let himself get carried away. Wren was different. She probably had a boyfriend, maybe even a fiancé, hidden somewhere in that enormous house. And even if she didn't, what would she want with a guy like him? Still, when she invited them to stay for dinner one night, he couldn't say no. The dining room was massive, but Wren set up a cozy table for 3 in the smaller breakfast nook. She cooked actual real food, not just some fancy catered stuff, and they laughed and talked like they'd known each other forever. After Ellie fell asleep curled up on the couch, Wren sat across from Holden, sipping wine. "You're good with him," she said quietly. Holden shrugged. "He's my whole world." Wren's eyes softened. "You're a good dad." He didn't know what to say to that. Compliments didn't come easy to him, so he just stared at her, noticing for the first time how the light caught the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. "What about you?" he asked, clearing his throat. "Family around?" She hesitated. "Not really. My parents passed a few years ago. It's just me now." Holden's heart twisted. He knew what loneliness felt like. He knew it too well. "You ever feel like you're living in a house full of stuff but it's still empty?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Holden nodded. "Every day." Their eyes locked, and for a second, the air between them shifted, charged, electric. Holden stood up abruptly, jolting them both back to reality. "I should get Ellie home," he said, his voice rough. Wren stood too, hugging herself. "Yeah, of course." The ride home was quiet. Ellie snored softly in the backseat, and Holden gripped the steering wheel too tightly. He couldn't fall for her. He couldn't. Because Wren Radley was way out of his league. And he didn't even know yet just how wide that gap really was. Holden tightened the last bolt on the stair railing, wiping the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. The early summer heat had found its way inside the mansion, clinging to the air despite the massive ceiling fans lazily spinning above. Ellie sat cross-legged on the marble floor nearby, deeply focused on assembling a jigsaw puzzle Wren had given him. Holden admired how easily she had found ways to keep his son entertained without treating him like a burden. Wren appeared from the hallway, carrying a large cardboard box. She set it down with a soft grunt, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Found this in one of the upstairs closets," she said. "It's full of old tools and stuff. Maybe there's something you can use." Holden crouched beside the box, rummaging through it. Most of the items were antiques: rusted wrenches, a hand-cranked drill, a level with a cracked glass tube. Still, he appreciated the offer. "Thanks," he said. "Some of this might clean up nice." A silence stretched between them, heavier than usual. "I've been meaning to ask," Wren said, sitting on the edge of the couch. "What made you start working for yourself?" Holden leaned back on his heels. "I didn't really have a choice. After Ellie's mom left, I needed a schedule that let me be there for him. Punching a clock for someone else wasn't gonna cut it." Wren's eyebrows knitted together. "She left." "Yeah," Holden's voice was even, but the memory still stung. "Said she wasn't ready to be a mom." Wren looked at Ellie, who was now expertly fitting puzzle pieces together, his tongue poking out in concentration. "He's lucky to have you," she said. Holden shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm the lucky one." Wren hesitated, then asked, "Was it hard, starting over like that?" Holden chuckled without humor. "Hard doesn't even cover it. lost a lot. Friends, the business, even my old place. Had to move into a tiny apartment over a laundromat, not exactly a fairy tale. Wren pulled her knees up, hugging them loosely. Maybe fairy tales are overrated. Maybe, Holden said. He sifted through the box again, using the excuse to avoid meeting her eyes. Illy's voice broke the tension. Daddy, look, I finished it. Holden grinned and ruffled his son's hair. You're a genius, buddy. Wren clapped softly. I think that calls for a celebration. Holden straightened. You don't have to. She was already heading toward the kitchen. I insist. Ice cream sundaes, my specialty. Illy whooped and scrambled after her. Holden followed, feeling a strange warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. The kitchen counters were quickly covered in bowls of toppings: chocolate chips, sprinkles, caramel sauce. Wren handed Holden a spoon and challenged, "Best Sunday wins." He raised an eyebrow. You're on. Illy meticulously piled his bowl with gummy bears and marshmallows. Wren crafted an elegant creation with neat rows of toppings. Holden, meanwhile, dumped a chaotic mountain of everything into his bowl, ignoring any sense of proportion. They judged each other's sundaes with mock seriousness, awarding Illy the victory unanimously. Afterward, while Illy lay on the couch watching cartoons, his sticky fingers clutching a blanket, Wren leaned against the counter beside Holden. You know, she said, tracing a pattern on the marble with her fingertip, most people don't bother getting to know me. Holden glanced at her. Why's that? They're more interested in other things, she said carefully, what they can get from me or what they think I can do for them. Holden frowned. Sounds miserable. It is. She looked up at him, her expression unguarded. But you're different. You don't treat me like some opportunity. That's because you're not, Holden said simply. You're just Wren. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Maybe you're the only one who thinks that. Holden opened his mouth to say something, but a sharp knock at the front door interrupted. Wren stiffened. Stay here. She disappeared down the hallway, her posture suddenly rigid. Holden peeked around the corner, curiosity prickling at him. Through the wide archway, he saw a man in a tailored suit standing at the door, holding a thick packet of documents. His voice carried into the house as he said, "MS. Radley, I just need your final signature for the acquisition." Wren's voice was low but firm. Told you, I'm not selling. Holden's stomach twisted. Acquisition? Selling what? The man pressed on. The board is getting impatient. Your parents' legacy. My parents' legacy is mine to protect, Wren snapped, not theirs to dismantle. Holden pulled back before he could be seen. He felt like he was intruding on something private, but the pieces were starting to click into place. Radley, that name sounded familiar. He just couldn't place it. Wren returned a few minutes later, her face tight. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sorry about that, she said. Holden didn't push. He just nodded, sensing she didn't want to talk about it. Later, as he buckled Illy into the truck, Holden caught Wren watching them from the porch, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm air. He raised a hand in a silent farewell. She waved back, but her smile was brittle. Driving away, Holden couldn't shake the feeling that Wren was carrying a weight much heavier than he'd ever guessed. And for the first time, he wondered if maybe he wasn't the one saving her. Maybe she needed saving too. The following morning, Holden was elbow-deep under Wren's grand entryway chandelier, adjusting a faulty wire, when a low rumble echoed up the driveway. He leaned over the railing to glance out the towering front windows, spotting a sleek black limousine pulling up to the house. Somehow he knew, instinctively, that it wasn't good news. Illy, sitting cross-legged on the hallway floor, lined up toy cars Wren had given him the day before. Holden stayed still, listening. The front door swung open without a knock, and a woman marched inside, her heels striking the marble with sharp, decisive clicks. She was tall, with an impeccable navy blazer, flawless makeup, and a coldness in her expression that could freeze the sun. Wren stepped into view from the living room, her posture stiff. The woman wasted no time. "You're impossible to reach, Wren," she said, her voice clipped. "Ignoring the board, ignoring my calls. This is not how your parents raised you." Holden couldn't slip away without being seen, so he stayed frozen, hidden by the massive staircase. Wren's voice was measured, but Holden could hear the tension beneath it. "I'm not changing my mind, Evelyn. The estate isn't for sale." "You're being emotional," Evelyn snapped. "This house, the company, it's all too much for you. You're playing house with strangers while your responsibilities crumble." Holden's stomach twisted. He didn't know exactly what they were talking about, but he knew what it felt like to have people doubt you, to be seen as less. "I'm not playing house," Wren said sharply. "And Holden isn't a stranger, he's helping me." Evelyn's gaze flicked toward the staircase, her mouth curling with disdain. "Helping you? With what, Wren? Pretending you're normal." Holden's fists clenched around his pliers. "Get out," Wren said, her voice low but lethal. Evelyn hesitated, clearly not used to being dismissed. After a long, loaded moment, she pivoted on her heel and stalked out, the heavy door slamming behind her. Wren stood there for a moment, staring after her, her hands trembling slightly. Holden cleared his throat softly. Wren turned, startled, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Sorry you had to hear that," she said, forcing a brittle laugh. Holden descended the ladder slowly. "You don't have to explain." She tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear, looking suddenly small in the cavernous hallway. "That was Evelyn. She's part of the board that oversees my family's company. She thinks I'm ruining everything." Holden set down his tools. "Are you?" "No," she said fiercely, then sagged a little. "At least, I don't think so." Holden crossed the distance between them, lowering his voice. "You're not. You're doing what's right for you." Wren blinked up at him, something raw flashing in her eyes. Before either of them could say more, Illy tugged at Holden's jeans. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" Holden crouched down. "Maybe later, bud. I need to finish fixing the light first." Wren knelt beside them. "Actually, would you both want to come with me to the farmer's market downtown? It's outside, lots of open space. Illy could run around a little." Holden hesitated. "You sure?" Her smile this time was genuine, positive. Illy bounced on his toes. "Please, Daddy." Holden ruffled his son's hair. All right, let me put my tools away." They drove in Wren's SUV, Holden feeling awkward in the passenger seat, not missing the way Wren deftly avoided the valet parking lot and found a side street spot instead. She didn't flaunt her wealth, if anything. She seemed desperate to blend in. At the market, the smell of roasted nuts and fresh bread filled the air. Booths lined the street, overflowing with flowers, jams, and hand-woven crafts. Illy darted from stand to stand, laughing, while Wren and Holden strolled behind him. "He's got a lot of energy," Wren said, handing Holden a cup of lemonade she bought from a vendor. Holden chuckled. "He keeps me on my toes." They stopped at a booth selling handmade wooden toys. Wren knelt beside Illy, pointing out a carved airplane. "Would you like this?" she asked. Illy's eyes widened. "Really?" Holden opened his mouth to protest, but Wren held up a hand. "My treat," she said lightly. Holden watched her, something shifting in his chest. She wasn't trying to impress. She genuinely cared. As they wandered deeper into the market, Holden noticed the way people's heads turned when Wren passed. Most smiled warmly or nodded, but a few whispered behind their hands. Wren kept her chin up, pretending not to notice, but her shoulders tightened. At a flower stand, Illy was picking out tulips when a woman in an expensive linen dress stepped up beside Wren. "Wren Radley," the woman said with a syrupy smile. "Still slumming it with the locals, I see." Holden stiffened. "Wren didn't miss a beat. Still pretending you're better than everyone, I see." The woman's smile faltered. Holden moved closer, placing a hand lightly on Wren's back. She leaned into the touch almost imperceptibly. The woman's gaze flicked to Holden, taking in his plain work boots, his worn jeans, and then she gave a tight little laugh. "Well, good luck with your charity work," she said, sauntering off. Holden waited until she was out of earshot. "You know her." "Unfortunately," Wren said. She crouched down to helpfully choose a bouquet. "People like that they think money makes them better." Holden crouched beside her. "Maybe they're just scared." She looked at him, surprised. "Scared of losing what they think makes them important," he said. Wren studied him for a long moment, then smiled, a real one. "You're smarter than you pretend to be," she said. "Don't tell anyone," Holden said, grinning. They spent another hour wandering the market. Wren bought Illy a honey stick and Holden a loaf of fresh sourdough, ignoring his protests. She took nothing for herself. As they walked back to the car, Illy asleep in Holden's arms, Wren turned to him. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For making today feel normal." Holden shifted Illy's weight carefully. "You don't have to thank me for that." She opened the car door, but before she climbed in, she hesitated. "I'm having a small party next week," she said. "Just a few people actually like. Would you come?" Holden raised an eyebrow. "Me, at a party?" Wren laughed. "You'll fit right in, I promise." Holden glanced at Illy, then back at her. Wren's expression was open, hopeful. "I'll think about it," he said. Wren beamed, and Holden felt something dangerous stir inside him. Because part of him already knew. He would have said yes to anything she asked. Holden adjusted the collar of his only decent button-down shirt as he stood outside Wren's mansion, Illy's small hand clutching his fingers tightly. String lights twinkled across the front lawn, casting a warm glow over the evening. The soft hum of live music floated through the air, mixed with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. "You sure we're dressed okay, Daddy?" Illy whispered, glancing nervously at the people milling about in crisp linen shirts and summer dresses. Holden crouched down. "We clean up just fine, buddy. Besides, Wren invited us. She wants us here." Illy nodded solemnly, and they made their way up the steps. Inside, the house had been transformed. Long tables were set up with platters of food so beautifully arranged, it seemed a crime to touch them. Servers in black vests floated through the crowd, offering trays of sparkling drinks. Holden grabbed 2 lemonades and handed one to Illy, keeping his own hands full so he wouldn't fidget. Wren emerged from a cluster of guests near the grand piano, wearing a soft blue dress that caught the light every time she moved. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't need to. Her presence alone seemed to center the entire room. When she saw them, her entire face lit up. "You made it," she said, weaving through the crowd to them. "Wouldn't miss it," Holden said, shifting Illy's weight to his hip. "Although I'm not sure we're fancy enough." Wren laughed, a sound richer and more relaxed than he'd ever heard from her. "You're perfect." Before Holden could answer, a tall man in a sharp gray suit approached. His hair was slicked back too carefully, and the tightness around his mouth suggested he wasn't thrilled to see them. "Wren," the man said, flashing a polished smile, "you didn't introduce your new friends." Wren's posture straightened subtly. "Holden Summers, his son, Illy. Holden, this is Grant Ellison. He's on the Radley board." Grant offered a limp handshake, assessing Holden with a glance so quick it was almost insulting. "Pleasure," Holden said dryly. Grant turned back to Wren. hope you're still rethinking your position. The merger offer won't stay on the table forever. Holden caught the flicker in Wren's eyes before she masked it. I'm not selling Grant, she said, her voice firm but calm. Not now, not ever. Grant's jaw ticked, but he didn't argue. Instead, he offered another tight smile and melted back into the crowd. Holden leaned closer. You okay? Wren blew out a breath. He'll get over it. They found a quieter corner of the courtyard where fairy lights zigzagged between trees and a small string quartet played under a white tent. Illy found a group of kids playing tag near the fountain and, after Holden's nod of permission, ran off to join them. Holden and Wren sat on a low stone wall bordering a rose garden. The scent of the flowers mixed with the cool night air. I guess I owe you an explanation, Wren said, picking at the hem of her dress. You don't owe me anything, Holden said, meaning it. She smiled, tired but grateful. When my parents died, they left me the company, Radley Industries. It's huge real estate, technology, shipping. I was supposed to take over, but the board treats me like a figurehead. They want me to sell off parts of it, piece by piece. Holden listened carefully, sensing she needed to get this out. I kept the estate the house because it's the only part that feels like them. Like home, her voice wavered. But the board keeps pushing. They think I'm weak. That'll fold. You're not weak, Holden said, his voice steady. You're the strongest person I know. Wren looked at him, her eyes shining under the soft lights. You see me, Holden, not the money, not the name. I see you, Holden said simply. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the party fading into the background. Finally, Wren said, I want to help you. Holden frowned. Help me. You've been struggling, I know it, and I can. Holden stood abruptly. Don't. Wren's face fell. I didn't mean to insult you. I know, Holden said, running a hand through his hair. But I'm not a project. I don't want handouts. I want to be enough for Illy, for myself. Wren rose too, her voice soft but fierce. You are enough. You've always been enough. Holden stared at her, the truth of her words cutting through years of self-doubt. Before he could find a response, Illy ran up, his cheeks flushed with excitement. Daddy, I made a new friend. His name's Leo and he has a puppy and he said we can visit. Holden laughed, caught off guard by the pure joy on his son's face. That's great, buddy. Wren crouched to Illy's level. You're pretty amazing at making friends. Illy beamed. It's easy when people are nice like you and Daddy. Holden's chest tightened. Wren stood, brushing her hands on her skirt. Come on, there's a fireworks show starting soon. Best views up on the balcony. They climbed the wide staircase to the second floor, Wren leading them down a hallway lined with old portraits. She pushed open a set of French doors, revealing a wide terrace overlooking the gardens. Holden lifted Illy onto his shoulders just as the first firework exploded in the sky, painting it red and gold. Wren leaned on the railing beside them, her face upturned, the colors reflecting in her eyes. Holden watched her, realizing that somewhere along the way, she had become a part of their tiny, battered family, and he didn't want to imagine life without her. As the finale lit up the sky, Holden settled down and turned to Wren. I've been scared, he said quietly, that I'm not enough for you, that I'll mess this up. Wren stepped closer, her hand sliding into his. I'm scared too, but I'm more scared of letting you go. Holden squeezed her hand, the decision settling in his chest like a steady heartbeat. Then don't, he said. Wren smiled, radiant and sure. I won't, she whispered. And as the last of the fireworks faded into the night, Holden leaned down, brushing his mouth against hers in a kiss that tasted like hope, like home, like the start of something real. Illy giggled behind them and shouted, You, kissing. They broke apart, laughing, and Holden scooped Illy up in his arms. "Come on, buddy," he said. "Let's go home." Wren slipped her arm around Holden's waist as they walked back into the house together, the future unfolding ahead of them, bright and full of promise. The days after the party passed in a flutter of change Holden hadn't seen coming. Wren had invited them to spend more time at the estate, and before long, it felt less like a house he was hired to fix and more like a home he was being welcomed into. One late afternoon, Holden found himself in the sun-drenched library, shelves towering around him, books he'd never have time to read filling every corner. Illy sat cross-legged on the thick rug, building an elaborate tower out of wooden blocks Wren had rescued from the attic. Wren entered carrying a tray with lemonade and a plate of sandwiches. She set it down on a low table, her expression lighter than he had ever seen it. "Grant called again," she said, untucking her hair from behind her ear. Holden leaned back in the armchair, watching her carefully. What did he want this time? "He finally accepted that I'm not selling anything," she said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "I made it clear that if he didn't back off, I'd replace the entire board." Holden let out a low whistle. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." "You'd never manage it," Wren said, laughing as she dropped into the chair across from him. Holden leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're really doing it, Wren. You're holding your ground." "For the first time, it feels like it's mine." She traced patterns on the glass of lemonade absently, "Not just something I inherited, something I chose." He nodded, pride swelling in his chest. She wasn't the guarded woman he had first met. She had fought for her place, and she had won. Illy looked up from his tower. "When can we live here forever?" Wren froze, her glass halfway to her mouth. Holden's heart thudded painfully against his ribs. "Illy," Holden said carefully, "this isn't our house, buddy." Wren set her lemonade down. "Maybe it could be." Holden stared at her, not sure he'd heard right. She rose from her chair and crossed the room, kneeling next to Illy. "Would you like that?" she asked softly. Illy nodded so hard his curls bounced. Wren turned to Holden, her eyes clear and certain. "I love you both. I want us to be a family." Holden stood, the room tilting slightly around him as emotions warred inside his chest. "I'm not rich, Wren," he said, his voice rough. "I don't come from anything. I can't give you the world." She rose too, closing the distance between them. "I don't want the world. I want you." Holden cupped her face with his calloused hands, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "I love you," he whispered. Wren's eyes shone. "I love you, Holden Summers, and Illy, both of you." He kissed her, slow and sure, the kind of kiss that promised forever. Illy whooped and clapped his hands, and Holden laughed against Wren's mouth. Later that evening, after Illy had fallen asleep curled between them on the oversized sectional in the living room, Wren traced lazy circles on Holden's forearm. "I was thinking," she said, her voice low and warm, "we could have a small wedding. Nothing huge, just us, Illy, and a few friends." Holden kissed the top of her head. "Sounds perfect." "And afterward, we can make it official. You and Illy can move in. No more back and forth." Holden tightened his arm around her. "Home sounds real good to me." They sat there in the dim light, the future unfurling between them like a promise. Several months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Wren and Holden stood beneath a canopy of golden leaves in the garden behind the mansion. Wren wore a simple ivory dress that floated around her like a dream. Holden wore a dark gray suit Illy had proudly picked out for him. Illy served as the ring-bearer, marching down the makeshift aisle with fierce concentration, the tiny velvet pillow clutched in his hands. When Wren reached Holden's side, she slipped her hand into his without hesitation. The vows were simple, spoken from hearts that had already chosen each other long before today. "I promise to choose you every day," Wren said, her voice steady. I promise to protect you, to laugh with you, and to build a life with you, Holden answered. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Holden kissed Wren with all the quiet passion he had carried inside him from the moment he met her. The small crowd cheered, and Ellie threw handfuls of flower petals into the air, laughing so hard he nearly toppled over. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Holden carried Wren across the threshold of the estate, Ellie trailing behind them with his arms full of stuffed animals and treasures he refused to leave behind. They celebrated with a homemade dinner in the cozy kitchen, spaghetti and meatballs, Ellie's request. They toasted with apple cider, and Holden lifted Ellie onto his shoulders again when they danced clumsily around the room. After Ellie had fallen asleep upstairs, Wren and Holden sat together on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars blink into life overhead. Holden kissed Wren's temple. You ever think about how crazy it is we ended up here? Wren smiled against his shoulder. Not crazy, meant to be. Holden tightened his arms around her, his heart full in a way he had never thought possible. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing after something better. He had already found it, right here with Wren and Ellie. Their life wasn't perfect, it was better. It was theirs, forever.